heart. Sahana Bhavatu. Om Sahana Bhavatu. Om Sahanau Bhunaktu. Om Sahanau Bhunaktu. Saha Viryam Karavahavahi. Sahaviryam Karavahavahi. Tejasvinafutitamastu. Tejasvinafutitamastu. Mavishvashahavahi. Mavishvashahavahi. Om Purnamada. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Udachyate Purnasya Purnam Purnasya Purnam Adaya Adaya Purnamiyava vashishyate Purnamiyava vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you so much. So I have some prints for you here actually that I have bound in a simple way. Maybe actually you have them, yeah? Because it's just the Yoga Sutras. So here I have the Yoga Sutras for you, and I have the Yoga Sutras for you, and I have the Yoga Sutras for you. And as a matter of fact, I also have the Yoga Sutras for you. And maybe you can give the Yoga Sutras also to you. And I have the Yoga Sutras too. So we do not know who was Patanjali. The Yoga Sutras just appeared, yeah, and they appeared about around the year Christ, you could say. So some say 300 before to 500 after. So what happened at that time? You know, at this time, because we know we are traveling a little bit through the history here. At this time, we had the Shramanas. You know, the Shramanas were people with dreadlocks, you know, sitting in the forest, yeah. Some of them smoking chillum, actually, so they were real hippies. They were actually smoking pot, so they were like sitting in the forest, you know, with large dreadlocks, yeah. And they were trying to seek out the last mysteries of existence, yeah. Many of them were Samkhya practitioners. Samkhya is the root religion or the root philosophy of yoga and Buddhism. So, you know, Buddhism has, as a matter of fact, not a lot to do with yoga. These are two different things. But if you go to a yoga studio and you see a Buddha statue, yeah, then there is a certain connection to yoga and Buddhism. But this connection is not very close. The connection is through Samkhya. So there is like, there is Samkhya meditation, and out of Samkhya developed yoga and developed Buddhism. So they have similarities, but they are not the same. Yeah, there is of course Buddhistic yoga, yeah, like Buddhistic yoga practices, but also the philosophy of Buddhism is kind of different. For example, the highest aim, the highest stage of development of mind, of being in Buddhism is the achievement of complete emptiness. So it's the achievement of nirvana, which is of course freedom, defined as freedom. However, the highest goal in yoga is not nirvana, yeah, it is samadhi. And samadhi, in a way, is different, because also in tantric yoga, samadhi is filled with something. So samadhi is satchitananda, samadhi is ecstasy. So samadhi is not empty, in a profound sense, more colorful. So there was these Shramanas living in the forests, yeah, and these Shramanas were, you could say, they were Vedic rebels. They were rebels that didn't want to follow the Vedic way of living and the Vedic way of practice, and they wanted to find a kind of new way of spirituality, new way of practice. And they went into the forest to find Brahman, so to find God. And many of them also had very fierce practices, like, bringing one arm up and never putting this arm down, or standing on one foot and never sitting down, and hanging with one leg from a tree with the head over the fire, and so on. Sitting in a ring of fire in the midday sun with a hot stone on your head, yeah, or gazing into the sun and never closing your eyes, like techniques like this, which, some of these techniques lead successfully practiced to death, of course, but it was an expression a little bit of yogic tapas and of this unbreakable strength of the early practitioners. And these people developed the Samkhya philosophy. So the Samkhya philosophy is a philosophy of observation, and through proper observation of reality and through proper meditation of what you see, finding the truth about what is and what you are, and in that way, by realizing reality, so by finding reality outside of your imagination of reality. So you could say exchanging imagination against reality, and by fully becoming one with reality, reaching freedom. This is like Samkhya philosophy. Samkhya philosophy also has this dualistic idea of having a Purusha, so there is a supreme soul, which is pure consciousness, and there is nature, so there are the phenomena of nature. And by proper observation of how the phenomena of nature are manifest as an outflow of consciousness, the Samkhya practitioners would move from the outer manifestation of something back into the source, which is consciousness. So moving back into the primary source. So this is Samkhya philosophy, Samkhya meditation, and somehow the basic principles of this we find in yoga. The main difference between yoga and Samkhya is in yoga we have God, in Samkhya we don't have God. Samkhya is atheistic. And it's interesting that we also have that atheism in Buddhism again. So like you could say that the theistic branch from Samkhya moved into yoga, and the atheistic branch moved into Buddhism. Because in Buddhism, in a way, there is no God. But it's interesting that later in Hinayana Buddhism, God came back, but God came back in form of the Buddhas, in form of the Avalokitesharas, in form of the incarnations, yeah, somehow. So somehow you could say the Dalai Lama, in that sense, as a master of Mahayana Buddhism, is a kind of God figure, that the God came back in the form of the spirit of Buddha. So they're not completely atheistic, actually, yeah, in a deeper sense. So, but yoga has God. How does yoga have God? Well, yoga approaches God, you could say, stepwise. It approaches God step by step by saying, so first, this would be a Samkhya reasoning. Samkhya reasoning would be, you have different experiences in your life. You have the experience of being a young girl, and then you have the experience of being a middle-aged man, and then maybe you become an older person, and then maybe you die. However, in the course of your experiences of being a young person, a child, an adult, and then eventually becoming old, you have different thoughts in the course of your life. You may also have different feelings. As a matter of fact, you have different experiences. Not even this, all your body changes. Matter of fact, your body actually dies multiple times in the course of your life because all of your cells become exchanged. And here is a very interesting phenomenon at hand. The phenomenon is, nevertheless you change from the beginning of your life to your end. There seems to be one consistent observer within you that experiences you yourself as one singular thing. And this is extremely surprising, because you are not a singular thing. First of all, you are always changing thoughts, you are changing feeling, you are changing body, you are changing time, you are changing place, you're not a singular thing. Why should it be that you wake up every morning in the same body? You are never the same person. However, the interesting experience is there is one single you that creates a narrative of you being born till the end. And this singular you that spans together the different yous that you are, because you're a different you when you're small than when you're old, that singular element that, like a pearls on a single thread, creates one person and says, that's the person Clemens, or that's the person Vanessa, or that's a person. It's one thing, but it's never one thing. Actually, the whole thing doesn't exist. It died already 500,000 times. However, that thing that creates a single narrative, this thing is Purusha. This is a Samkhya definition. Purusha this is consciousness. And consciousness, per definition, is independent from the phenomenon of experience. Why must it be independent per definition? Because if it would be dependent, then that would mean that you're a different person. Makes sense? So if it would be dependent on your experience, it would mean that you're not you anymore, but you're actually somebody else. But this is not the case. You are you. Even if you think different, even if you feel different, you know that you're the same person. Therefore, consciousness must be different from the object of experience and always independent from it. So, Samkhya would say, consciousness, therefore, is that is per definition free and independent from any object of experience. Any. And completely unchanging. You know, what we had yesterday, consciousness is the vessel in which the universe is contained. But in that particular sense, consciousness is that thing that creates the person that you are. So it creates that individual. You could say it is also the soul that's identical. So consciousness creates the individual. So how do we approach God now? Well, first of all, we understood, that's what the Samkhya said, that apparently there is consciousness. So apparently it exists, that there is an awareness that can create an individual existence independently from the object of existence. So independently from the experience, which is very surprising. So there exists consciousness, I repeat the sentence again, that can create an experience, an entity, completely independent from its experience. Seems to be the case, okay? That consciousness, however, and interestingly, can have different degrees of expansion. This is also true. What is an expansion of consciousness? An expansion of consciousness is the information which is contained in consciousness. This information can always be different. Some people contain less information in their consciousness and others contain more. The information in consciousness is simply what you are aware of. Those things you are aware of are those information that is contained, and the things you're not aware of are those things which are not contained. When people, for example, take drugs, which I never do, then they say they experience an expanded state of consciousness. What does that mean? They say they actually experience different information being contained in consciousness than before. So, from this we can conclude that apparently it is the case that consciousness can be expanded and can be contracted. Simply. And it is true, because you know also from your own life that when you sleep, there is other information contained in consciousness than when you wake. Because when you sleep, then you're not aware of the fact that a wakeful self exists. And when you wake, you're not aware of the dream self that existed. Therefore, that means that there can be different stages of consciousness existing within you that you're not aware of. And there are different stages of consciousness apparently existing. So, since that is the case, the Samkhya concluded, we also know that therefore consciousness can be expanded and that consciousness can be contracted. If now we know that we exist in a certain degree of expansion or contraction, that means that somewhere in the universe, in eternity, there must exist the ultimate expansion of consciousness, in which all beings and all experience and all levels and all information is contained. Likewise, there must exist the ultimate contraction of consciousness, in which no information is contained. And this means that not only exists Purusha, so the individual person, but also exists Parapurusha. And Parapurusha means supreme person. And supreme person is that consciousness that contains the information of all consciousness. And that must exist simply because consciousness exists in different degrees. And this is the Samkhya reasoning for God, that they say, well, Parapurusha, Supreme Person, is Supreme Consciousness in which everything is contained. And this Supreme One Consciousness in which the whole universe takes place. Like you, for example, have a life of your own experience. Yeah? Your universe is how you wake up in the morning, how you do your day, and how you go to bed. However, the Samkhya say there is another consciousness in which the experience of everything is contained. That consciousness contains every experience of every living being in the universe, from the beginning to the end. And this is the Supreme Person in which everything is one. This is God, this is Ishwara. Okay? Ishwara is the Supreme Consciousness. Patanjali also defines that consciousness, yeah, and says, you know, Ishwara is that ever-expanded, supreme, pure, untainted, luminous consciousness that is contained within everyone and that contains everyone. Okay, so this is the yoga approach for the existence of God. And right, they claim the Samkhya have overlooked it. So, and then around Christ, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali were composed by Patanjali, and for us as yoga practitioners, they are somehow not only important philosophically, you know, to delve into the really rich, you know, spiritual power of yoga, but also they contain, you could say, they are made out of 4 chapters. That's important to understand, 4 chapters. And these 4 chapters are actually 4 ways to practice, kind of. Yeah? The first way to practice is for the enlightened people. Yeah? It's called Samadhipada. It's the way of enlightenment. So for those people who are really powerful meditators, and that the first chapter is for them. So how, if you're a really powerful meditator, you can immerse yourself in cosmic consciousness. This is the first one. The second chapter is for the regular practitioner, so for the one who needs to practice, which is us. Yeah? The second chapter, Sadharapada, also contains the Ashtu, the 8 steps of yoga. Yeah? The Ashtanga yoga contains the 8 steps. Yeah? Like, you know, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pratyahara, Dhyana, and Samadhi. They are important for us. Yeah? They are contained in the second chapter. The third chapter, yeah, Vibhuti-pada, concerns the way of magical power. So it concerns the way that when the yogi, you must know, since reality is an outflow of consciousness, resting in consciousness means to rest in the outflow of reality. Therefore, the yogis say that the one who has achieved complete consciousness is the one who possesses the magical powers. So the yogis are supposed to be actually magicians. So profoundly, the yoga is the yogi, the true yogi that rests in samadhi, is a magical being. So that bends the laws of nature, because as a matter of fact, they flow out of him. Yeah? And Vibhuti-pada is the way of supreme realization through the gateway of the magical powers. So first he describes the magical powers, and then he says how the yogi has to use these magical powers as a way to liberate truly himself and the world. So this is like in Vibhuti-pada. And then Kevalya-pada, which is the last chapter, the 4th chapter, deals with the mystery of reality. Somehow I have the feeling when I read Kevalya-pada is like Jnana Yoga a little bit. It's a contemplation, it's a meditation over the mystery of reality and over the immense beauty of reality. Okay? Good. So knowing that, we could actually start to read the Yoga Sutras. Do you have questions to what I have said so far? Maybe.
I don't know.
You don't know?
I'm not knowing. I have to think about it.
Is this the magical, is the this is called also the cities you got, then
Yes.
the cities, and you overcome the cities to, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That, the cities take place in a smaller or in a bigger form, always. And the cities are the awakenings of power. They're the awakenings of Shakti. And somehow you always awaken Shakti. So in every smaller step that you do on your path of yoga, you awaken power. So you awaken, you could say, some kind of empowerment of yourself. And even if it is just a piece of your mind that you achieve for yourself, this is also a siddhi. It's an empowerment. You remember what I said the first day, that the greatest life hack, so one of the greatest powers you can have, is being independent from your cravings to pleasure and pain. Because if you do that, suddenly everything becomes possible. Like if you're not afraid of any result of your actions, if you do not need any patting on your back for how great you are from other people, if you don't need their approval, or you're also not afraid of their disapproval or anything in any form, suddenly you are free. You're really free. Suddenly you can walk naked in the forest and live there for 10 years completely happy without any concern about the world. You can really be free. This is a superpower. And it is only your detachment from pleasure and pain. Because we do so many things because we are afraid of we could lose a pleasure, or we are afraid of the consequence of pain. Yeah? Just to explain, even this simple thing is actually a siddhi. It is a magical power. What could a person do with this magical power? Not to be concerned about the opinion of the others. Such a person, let's say, could be extremely fierce in an incredible way. Yeah? And then if his ego awakens in him and what he would like, he can also abuse in a way that power, or abuse himself, and then again fall. So on the way of yoga, on the way of the practice of yoga, which is the way of self-empowerment, the siddhis are always here. You could say, whenever you become free in a way from something, there is always a power, but every power requires an equal match of responsibility, or an equal match of consciousness, you could say. Yeah, an equal match of awareness of what it means all the time. Yeah. So, integration, samadhipada. So this is the first chapter. What we do is we read a little bit into this, and then again we make 5 minutes break or so. I may do a little bit more breaks because I know the Yoga Sutras are very intense, but they're also profoundly beautiful, and of course they are important for us. So, of course, Patanjali starts out with now the teachings of yoga, so the statement of, he starts with the teachings of yoga, and he does us a great favor because he is starting to define what is yoga, and he's doing that because the definition of yoga in the times before Patanjali was actually a slightly different one. Yoga was defined in the first place as the unity of the many pairs of opposites. The unity of the individual soul with the supreme soul, the unity of the in and the out breath, the unity of life and death, the unity, you could say, of the future and the past, yeah, which is the now. So always the unity of all of the pairs of opposites. And here he proposes a different definition, which in a way leads back to that definition, but it's a definition that Patanjali extensively uses throughout the text, and that is important for understanding his yoga. He says, yoga is the stilling of the pattern of consciousness. Then pure awareness can abide in its very nature. Otherwise, awareness mistakes itself to be the patterns of consciousness. So the translation here is a little tricky. The pattern of consciousness is the patterns of mind. Yeah? That the original Sanskrit term here is chitta. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. This is the Sanskrit term of that verse. And Chitta is the field in which the experiences of the individual take place. This is chitta. You could salop and fast translate this with the mind stuff or the mind. And he's saying yoga is to make that mind be still. And then you could say, well, yoga is to make that mind be still. And then you could say, well, why should the mind be still? And then he says, well, because then pure awareness can abide in its very nature. So saying, well, because only if the mind is still, the self, pure awareness, consciousness can rest in its nature. I think many questions come up here immediately, also in my mind, in that sense. Why should consciousness want to rest in its nature? What does it mean to rest in its nature? We will come to this here. Then consciousness, yourself, can rest in your nature. And then you could say, but why should consciousness rest in its nature? Well, because otherwise, that's the next sentence, otherwise consciousness, so yourself, your very self, mistakes itself to be the patterns of mind. I inverted these terms here, yeah? But it's because consciousness here can be used as a synonym for different things. Because otherwise, the self that you are mistakes itself to be the pattern of mind. Meaning, practically meaning, there is reality, yeah? That reality is the experience, fundamentally, that reality is the experience of your own self. Because, what we had yesterday, reality is the outflow of consciousness. There is no objective reality outside. Even ChatGPT apparently agrees with me in this. Yeah? So there is only consciousness, a fundamental reality, and the apparent physical reality is an outflow of it. So, meaning, resting in one's own true self means to rest in the truth. It means to rest in what actually is. The patterns of mind, however, are interpretations of reality. They are interpretations of what you are, interpretations of what you are, interpretations of what you are. They are not the actual truth about who you are. And, in a profound sense, they are therefore interpretations of what you are yourself, instead of an actual understanding of who you are. And therefore, they are divergence from the reality. They are divergence from the truth. They are lies. Yeah? Literally lies. Your thoughts, in a way, your desires, your needs are lies. Yeah? They divert you from the actual truth of what really exists. Yeah? What really is right now here. Reality. And therefore, the goal of yoga is to rest in the apparent, untainted true self, so that the true nature of what things truly are can shine forth and can manifest. There are 5 types of patterns of mind that may not or may cause suffering. He just says about them. He speaks about right perception, misperception, imagination, deep sleep, and remembering. In the following verses, Patanjali defines these 5 modifications of mind and says, right perception arises from direct observation, inference, or reliable testimony of others. Then he says, misperception is false knowledge, not based on what actually is. Conceptualization or, imagination is a thought based on an image that arises from words, concepts. The concept is always a word. It is not in contact with real things. The word, per se, can never be in contact with real things. Yeah? The word is an abstraction. It's not real. Yeah? Deep sleep is a pattern grounding in the perception that nothing exists. Remembering is the retention of experiences. Both practice and non-reaction are required to still the patterning of consciousness. The practice of yoga is the sustained effort to rest in that stillness. So, again, this is the practice for the enlightened, for the meditator. The practice for the meditator is, listen, your practice is only non-reaction. Understand that your mind has patterns. Understand that your mind creates reflections. Don't react. This is everything that is required. Both practice and non-reaction is required to still the patterning of consciousness. And then what is yoga? The practice of yoga now for you as a strong meditator is a sustained effort to rest within that stillness. This is everything you do. You don't react. So you would sit and you would not react to the mind, to what the mind tells you. And then you would rest in that stillness arising. What happens if you rest in that stillness arising? If this practice becomes firmly rooted when it is cultivated skillfully and continuously for a long time, then freedom is the triumphant state of consciousness that is beyond the influence of desire. The mind ceases to thirst for anything it has seen or heard of, even what is promised in the scriptures. When the ultimate level of non-reaction has been reached, pure awareness can clearly see itself as independent from the fundamental qualities of nature. The settled mind is known as samadhi. The previous verse says that the goal of yoga is that the settled mind is different from, that you understand that you are different from the fundamental qualities of nature. You know, the qualities of nature are the gunas, the three gunas. Yeah? To understand that the self is free and independent from it. Yeah? So here in the following verses, he simply speaks about different stages of samadhi, in which the mind becomes dissolved and the self dissolves away to ever deeper and deeper levels of realization. 120. For all others, faith, energy, mindfulness, integration, and wisdom form the path to realization. For those who seek liberation wholeheartedly, realization is near. How near depends on whether the practice is mild, moderate, or intense. So, here comes something beautiful now. Realization may also come if one is oriented towards the ideal of pure awareness, Ishwara, the creative source from which we have emerged. So he says, you know, you can meditate, of course, yes, like we said, non-reaction, but you can also orient yourself towards Ishwara, yeah, towards the creative source. What is Ishwara? Well, Ishwara is a distinct, incorruptible form of pure awareness, utterly independent of cause and effect and lacking any store of latent impressions. Well, so Ishwara is a distinct, so it is apparently very clear, but it is an indestructible, unchangeable form of complete pure awareness, and it is completely independent of cause and effect, and it lacks any store of modification of mind. So Ishwara is that ever-expanded consciousness. So Ishwara is God in a way. It's a term for God. Yeah? In it lies the finest seed of all knowledge. So everything, what is that thing when it is known that everything else is known? This is a statement from the Vedas. Yeah? I believe that Yajnavalkya, a Vedic saint, also asks, you know, tell me that thing that when I know it, everything else is known. Yeah? And that thing that when you know it, everything else is known, that very thing is the Supreme. Yeah, that very thing in the Vedas is Brahman. And here it's interesting that Patanjali says, in it lies the finest seed of all knowledge. So apparently that ever-expanded form of consciousness is that thing that when it is known, everything else is known. Existing beyond time, Ishvara was also the ideal of the Asians. So Ishvara is beyond time, it has been forever, and it is the ideal that ever has been. So whenever somebody in the past said, this is the ideal, it was also Ishvara. Ishvara is represented by a sound, Om. You know, there are different understandings of what Om is, but apparently Om is the sonic form of God. You know, God in seed form, the creative act of the Supreme. This is what Om is, yeah? And he says, through repetition, its meaning becomes clear. So somehow Om cannot be explained in a way. Om can only be repeated. Om. And Om is that the sound of God, of Ishwara. Then interiorization develops and the obstacles fall away. So apparently there are obstacles on the way of yoga. And I really like these obstacles. I think they're amazing. I read them to you for a second and we talk about them because they are really interesting actually. Sickness, apathy, doubt, carelessness, laziness, hedonism, delusion, and lack of progress, as well as inconstancy. So, these hindrances on the path of yoga, there are all distractions which by steering up consciousness act as barrier to stillness. When we look at these obstacles on the path of yoga, sometimes the Western mind could say, well, you know, sickness, apathy, doubt, you know, these things, we're not really responsible for them, no? Like, you see, sickness, no? Why is this an obstacle? I mean, in a sense, if it befalls me, what can I do about it? You're apathic, you know? If apathy befalls me, yeah, so I'm unable to actually pay attention, what can I do that befalls me? If doubt befalls me, you know, what can I do? My mind must doubt. All things remain forever unsecure. How can I ever be secure in anything? Of course I must doubt. So what is interesting here is, yoga is a philosophy for which reason I believe that it is very suitable for the 21st century. So you could say yoga is kind of Asian superstitious thing, yeah, from 2000 years ago. But actually I think it's very appropriate for today because yoga is the philosophy, I want to define it like this, of radical self-responsibility. So it's the philosophy of radical, complete, without any compromise, responsibility. In yoga, it is never the case that it is not you who is the cause of anything that you experience. It is always you, at all times. There is never anything outside which is responsible. It's never politics, it's never your partner, it's never anyone else. It is forever you and it has always been you. It is always completely your fault and only yours. You know? And you can now say, oh man, this is so depressing. Yeah. I'm completely responsible for absolutely everything I ever think and that ever happened to me. Well, on the other hand, this is part of the empowerment. Because only if you take complete responsibility for absolutely every experience that you drag around with you, only then you carry the seed of changing it. You know, if I victimize you, telling you, you're such a poor victim of this or that circumstance, at that moment I'm actually telling you, you are powerless to change anything about it, because anyways, you're a victim. But yoga is telling you that you actually have power. You're supposed to have power. And in that sense, you're completely responsible. So, you can read it like this, that the Yoga Sutras start to tell you, well, if you're sick or if you feel sickish, well, stop it. You know, if this is your problem, you ought to stop. Well, if you are apathic, so you're not paying attention, well, pay attention. If you have doubt, stop being doubtful now. The reason is, nothing is ever perfect. Every truth is constantly enveloped in a kind of, in flaws. Yeah? Just like fire is enveloped by smoke, just like the fetus is wrapped in the membrane. example we have in the Bhagavad Gita. So everything is forever incomplete. Yeah? If you start to follow the doubtful mind, you will doubt everything, and at the end you will do nothing. Yeah? Therefore, have a firm mind. Do not have a doubtful mind. You know, choose something and then firmly following to the end. And when doubt arises, throw the doubt away. Because nothing is ever perfect. And nothing is ever completely satisfactory. It is not. Therefore, stop to doubt. And do what you know that is already right. You know? You should also take care. You should not be careless. Things are very important. Carelessness is a statement saying that the world is not important, but the world is profoundly important. The world is very important. You also shouldn't be lazy, because when you're lazy, nothing can be created. You shouldn't be hedonistic. So seeking out pleasures, because, as I said before, this should not be your guide. You know? In the same way, you should not flee pain. You should not be deluded. I really like this one, because delusion is something that people always feel themselves being victimized. Now they always think they just didn't understand correctly. But to understand correctly, this is what not being deluded means. It means to see what actually happens. That ability is within you, and you ought to awaken that ability. So you could say, it is your job to understand correctly. This is very, very empowering, because very often we go through the world and we think we understand something, or we think we have seen something. But did we really make the effort to understand correctly? Or is it that the understanding that we are having is convenient for us? Very often there is a subject, different subjects, subject of ecology, subject of politics, subjects of war, subjects of peace, subjects of health, subject of relationship, whatever. And we have a certain insight into these subjects. We possess a certain understanding. However, very often the understanding that we are possessing is convenient for us in the one or the other way. Do we really put the effort not to be deluded? Like, do we stop, break through the illusion and actually see what the thing really is, independently from what we would like to have it? Yeah? Because certainly we would like to be things in a certain way. So like his statement here that the yogi has to overcome the delusion is a very clear statement in do the effort to understand correctly what things actually are, because you can understand correctly. Most of the opinions we are having are not a reflection of truth. The opinions that we're having, so our understanding, because this is what an opinion is, our understanding are here to serve the agenda of our minds. Most of the time. If I understand the world to be like this or that, it's because it serves me. It serves my person. Then lack of progress, also beautiful. You know, many people are sitting and doing Nadi Shodhana for years, no progress. Well, make progress. Yeah? Progress in yoga is achieved easily. It's achieved through progress. Yeah? Through making progress. You know how I do that, for example? I do it like this. I'm aware of the mystery that the matter is heavy. I'm aware of the fact that the whole world... So I'm aware of two things. First of all, I'm aware that reality is a constantly foaming, a constantly creative, changing foam of possibility in which the desires of the universe, the desires of the world take shape slowly and progressively. They evolve out of the current shape into the next shape. This is the way I sometimes perceive the world. So I perceive the world as a place of mysterious manifestation in which somehow reality out of consciousness takes shape. But this shape taking, so that things become real in that sense, that you have a certain wish and suddenly you experience a fulfillment of that wish, that shape shifting of reality takes time. It takes the time of the manifestation of the physical reality. And the time of the manifestation can take a whole lifetime. You know, maybe you're waking up one day, you're 7 years old, you're a little girl, and you're thinking something, and you think to yourself, I like to do this. And only if a very firm, from the bottom of your heart, you will want to experience that. And suddenly, 40 years later, now you are 47, you're experiencing it. You know, suddenly the thing comes to you and you are very amazed because you remember that when you were 7, you were actually thinking about this. The interesting thing is that this is what human beings constantly experience. Actually, human beings experience that what they profoundly desire, you know, or what they profoundly somehow are attracted to in the one or the other way, in a good or a bad way, becomes somehow true. At least this is in my life, what I experience, you know. So, and the trick I'm using to do that, and this is also a trick I want to propose you, I'm also doing this with the progress of yoga, yeah. The trick that I'm doing actually like the lemon, yeah. What I'm doing is, I am placing my intent in the world. So for example, my intent for progress, for understanding in yoga, but I absolutely do not do any effort to force the world in any form to give it to me in the form I wish. So I'm just saying, this is important for me. I want this to be done. And then I give that wish to the universe and I absolutely forget about it. So I continue and go on with my life. And what I experience is that when I do that, things happen. And it seems to be that what I said before, it seems to be because this is the nature of the universe. The universe is a womb, and in that womb I plant my seed. This we have in the Bhagavad Gita, yeah? And then out of that womb bursts forth the manifestations. So like the universe that you have is a womb, you're placing seeds there. Every thought that you have, every feeling that you have is a seed that you plant into that womb. And in that womb these seeds grow constantly. Yeah? And the experiences that you have are actually the expressions of what the seeds planted in the past that grew in that womb. That is the world, that is the universe. Yeah? So understand this. I also think that our lack of progress in yoga, we overcome with this. So I'm not concerned with my progress in yoga because what I'm just doing is I give my heart to what I want to learn and what I want to teach, and I want to experience that, and I want to give that, and I want to understand that, and I give away any desire in any way that this shall appear to me or come into my perception in any particular form. Yeah, I just do that. Yeah, and I'm confident that progress will happen, and if progress doesn't happen, then it doesn't happen now, but it happens another day. Yeah, or maybe not, or I don't care. Yeah. So now I believe that you should do the same. And then inconstancy. So you should be constant in your practice. So, and now you could say, well, you know, these things are extremely hard. Yeah, I cannot overcome the hindrances of my practice. And now Patanjali tells you a few more things which are very interesting. And then he comes to the solution. He says, there are all distractions which by stirring up consciousness act as barriers to stillness. And when they do, one may experience distress, depression, or the ability to maintain steadiness of posture and breathing. So, how can you know in yoga, how can you know about yourself if any of these obstacles have befallen you or the other person? You know, maybe you can't see it. Maybe you're so darkened you can't understand yourself at all. Maybe you live in the mist. You know, maybe you can't even get a handle on you. You can't even have a grip on you. You do not understand you yourself actually. Every day you wake up in the morning and you wonder, you know, what am I? You know, you do not know if you're lazy or doubtful or apathetic. This is far from your perception because you just pushed through life and you do not understand. Well, it is interesting that these inner phenomena inside of you are visible outside in your practice of yoga. How are they visible outside in the practice of yoga? Well, they are visible as first of all the inability to maintain steadiness of breathing. How is that possible? Well, you know, first of all, the breathing process is the process in which consciousness at very first becomes manifest inside of you. Yeah? You inhale in your belly, you exhale from your belly. The exhalation, the exhaling breath, is the consciousness movement to the outside object. The inhaling breath is the consciousness movement into the dream state. The holding of the breath is the consciousness movement into concentration or into the meditative state of mind. Yeah? Consciousness flows constantly between the breaths. When people are breathing like this, then consciousness is forced outside into the outside object. That person has no awareness about the inner object and is therefore hunted in the inner object. If consciousness flows like this, or then there is different phenomenon. Yeah? So whenever consciousness is distorted out of the center, breath is distorted out of the center. When you practice to control your breath, you practice to control consciousness back to the center. When you practice breath to come still, consciousness can become still. Your own disturbances of consciousness you can see inside your breath. So even before you yourself understand about yourself, how you even feel, maybe you don't even know what you feel or know what you think, yeah? Observe your own breathing and center that breathing, control that breathing, watch that breath. And by watching that breath, the hindrances are overcome in a very profound sense. So you could say, by the practice of pranayama, your delusion, your hedonism, your laziness, your carelessness, and even your doubt can be overcome. But it is not only the breath, it is also the inability to maintain steadiness of posture. So like when you're unable to sit properly, or when you're unable to hold the posture, it means there's a disturbance of consciousness. You know, the human being can do much more than what you think. It is usually consciousness that allows you to stay in a posture, or consciousness that pushes you out of it. I see it with beginners of yoga, so people who really start in yoga. It's so interesting. You know, I'm also a beginner, of course, but there are people who are even more a beginner. Yeah? And I see the people who are even more a beginner than the beginner that I am, and I look at them and I see how difficult it is for them to stay in one place in the posture, or to stay in one place in the mind. And I understand that the place of the posture is the same place that also the mind takes. So posture, mind and breath are one. And this is not just some kind of saying, but it means that through the posture you control mind. Through the posture mind becomes visible. Through the breath mind becomes visible. Through the breath, mind is controlled. When the mind is dispersed, breath is dispersed. When mind is centered, breath becomes centered. When breath becomes centered, mind becomes centered. So they're all connected. We are in. Yeah, they're all. Okay, so how can we overcome now these obstacles which are here? We can overcome these obstacles by working with any of the following principles. The first principle Patanjali suggests in overcoming the obstacles on the way of yoga is, in my estimation, the most beautiful of all principles. It is the cultivation of the qualities of the heart. Yeah? So what are the qualities of the heart? The qualities of the heart are friendliness towards the joyful, compassion towards the suffering, happiness towards the pure, and impartiality towards the impure. Very often, the qualities of the heart, they have two, somehow you could say they have two sides. One element of the quality of the heart is to have compassion with those people who suffer, and the other element of the quality of the heart is to have joy with those people who are joyful. And both of these things are equally important. You may, for example, figure out that sometimes it's easier to have compassion with people than to enjoy with them, or vice versa. Both of these things are the elements of the quality of the heart. True friends can equally enjoy with you. In the same time, they also are here with your suffering in compassion. If one of those two is lacking, the heart is not truly there. So the heart is something that is friendliness with the joyful, has compassion with those who suffers, is happy with those who are pure, and is impartial towards the impure. It reminds me to what C.G. Jung said. C.G. Jung said that any psychotherapy, so any attempt to repair yourself by means of psychology, by means of self-inquiry, can be overcome or subdued with sufficient moralic effort. So with sufficient effort on a moralic level. So to straighten yourself out as a person. Therefore, that means that any psychological problem that you may have is deeply rooted also in some kind of problem with the quality of your own heart. So somewhere inside of you, there is something that darkens you. This is why you suffer, in a way. It is very beautiful because it brings people again back into responsibility, which in the 21st century is not, people don't like to see this so much, that people are actually not responsible for themselves. But here also, the suffering, so the hindrance on the way of practice, are overcome or can be overcome by the cultivation of the qualities of the heart. Apparently also Jung saw it that way. Yeah. Or here come other elements, or by pausing after the breath flows in and out, which is basically the practice of pranayama, so the practice of breath control. Because what we had before is that breath and mind are of course connected, or breath and posture are connected. So if we control the breath and we observe our breath in that way, we are also controlling our minds. Or with awareness cultivation, or by steadily observing as new sensations materialize, the cultivation of awareness. Or when experiencing thoughts that are luminous and free of sorrow, which is basically the concentration on that what is meaningful, the orientation towards that what is good, or by focusing on things that do not inspire attachment, or by reflecting on insights culled from sleep and dreaming, which is the unity of the wakeful state and the dream state. Thinking about what you have dreamt in the night, which is a very, very, very beautiful thing. As I said before, because the night is the dream state of consciousness. So it's the other side of who you are. You're moving in your day-to-day life between the wakeful state of consciousness, which is Jagrat, into the dream state of consciousness, which is Swapna. And then you have the deep sleep stage of consciousness, which is Sushupti. And then you have the meditative state of consciousness, which is Turiya. And you're moving mainly in your day-to-day life. You're moving consciously between the wakeful state and the dream state. And this movement, the way you move between the wakeful state and the dream state, in between these two, so whenever the wakeful state and the dream state meet, there is the chance for the meditative state of mind to arise. When they both come together. What is the dream state of your consciousness? The dream state of a consciousness is also your thoughts. This is when you're thinking, you're actually dreaming. In the same way, when you dream, your thoughts take you over and they absorb you into that dimension of dreams.
But I think the whole time, so I'm always in dream state, where I think the whole time.
Yes, then you're closer, when you're thinking strongly, then you're closer to the dream state. But the wakeful state is also present. You see, what is the practice of meditation? If I, for example, tell you to sit and to focus on a point, then what would you do? You would, in the wakeful state, become consciously aware of what you're thinking. So what's really happening is that the wakeful state and the dream state become one. Because when you're just thinking without being aware of it, you're actually dreaming. And then you move back into the wakeful state and you see objects and things laying around and you're not thinking anymore and you're in the objective state. And then you fall back into the dream state and you're thinking. But you're not really aware of the nature of both of them. Yeah? You're drawn into the wakeful state without actually understanding what the wakeful state means. And then you're drawn back into the thinking state without having control over your thought. Meditation fuses these two. At the same time, when you would, in your dream state, awaken your wakeful state, what I said before. So in the dream state, meditate on the wakeful state. So meditate on full self-awareness. Yeah? In that moment, also the meditative state in the dream state is achieved. And of course, always right before going to bed and right before waking up, right after waking up, this is a very, very good time so that the wakeful, that the dream state and the wakeful state can become one. So you can discover about the nature of you or the nature of your dream state in the early wakeful state. And these two can communicate. You can understand what your inner nature is. So I think these moments in the early morning are actually important, intimate moments. It's extremely important, for example, don't bring your smartphone with you to bed or so, you know, it's really important, yeah? Like, withstand that addiction. I think when you are younger, it's maybe a little bit harder, because people who are young are more clueless, they do not know what to do with their lives, and because they do not know what to do with their lives, there is nothing else competing with their attention than those things which are already competing for their attention. Like they themselves don't compete with the outer things about their attention. You know, like Facebook, Instagram, X and news and everything is competing for their attention, but they don't compete back. When you get older, you start to compete back. What does that mean? You start to realize that there are things you have to do, and you start to realize that you do not have enough time to actually realize the dreams that you want to live, and you're competing with those robbers of your awareness, and you start to pull back awareness. This is of course the time where it's very important for you, you know, not to have these surfaces around you. You really should not bring them with you. Yeah? You should not, especially not in the morning. Like in the morning you should wake up and you should be in bed and rest there and think about the dream state. So you should think about what you have dreamed, and you should be very intimate with yourself. And you should derive the insights from your dream state. And also before going to bed, maybe you should have a little diary in your hand where you write down what that day that you experienced now meant for you. Maybe you should write down in a little diary what was important for you in that day, what you have liked to do different, and what you are proud of, what you did well. You know? Bringing the wakeful state into the dream state and bring the dream state into the wakeful state. You should do that. Yeah. Very, very important. You also, yeah, it's you know, the thing is with you as a human being, you possess several superpowers. Yeah. But the first superpower that you possess, this is the very first power, is your power of awareness. It's the power of consciousness itself. And since it's your first superpower, self-evidently everybody wants to possess it. Because by possessing your awareness, they possess your magic. What does it mean? Yeah? It means they possess whatever you are capable of doing. whatever you do in your life, and you do many things in your life. You create, you make money, you make friends, you create intellectual goods, you create music, you create arts, you create insight, all of those things you create. By means of harvesting your awareness, these things are harvested. This is why everyone wants to harvest your awareness. You really have to see it as a parasitical process, because it is a parasitical process. Like, they're competing for your awareness, because through your awareness they can get your riches from you. Because the awareness, the riches consist within the awareness. Therefore, withdraw your awareness back into yourself, so that you can use those riches for the sake of the growth of your own consciousness and of your way. Otherwise, you will become enslaved. It is extremely important. Yeah? Extremely important. So, good. Or by reflecting on insights culled from sleep and dreaming, or through meditative absorption in any desired object, or when one can become fully absorbed in any object, whether vast or infinitesimal. So and then he speaks about the transformation of consciousness that happens on the way of that meditative absorption, of that non-reaction, as he said in the beginning. And he says, as the patterning of consciousness subsides, a transparent way of seeing called coalescence saturates consciousness. Like a jewel, it reflects equally what lies before it, whether object, subject, or act of perceiving. And then he speaks about that these stages of consciousness may contain categories, they may contain linguistic categories or not, they may contain reflection or not, they may contain memory or not. And then more and more, when consciousness contains less and less of those modifications of mind, so less of attachment, less of words, less of mind, less of opinions, because by the way, opinions are poison. So containing less and less and less opinions, then suddenly consciousness can enter the state of Ritambara, which is the state of complete truth. This level is called Ritambara, where consciousness only perceives true, 248. This wisdom, also 148, sorry. This wisdom is different from insights acquired through inference or teachings. The former means is intuitive and things as they are in their totality, whereas the latter means, the usual way, is partial. So this Ritambara is a way of pure reflection. You know, Buddha sometimes in the Buddhistic tradition is described as being transparent or to reflect on things. So here, Ritambara is that stage in which consciousness only reflects on truth. So if there is only reflection of what is, this wisdom is different from insights acquired through inference or teachings. The former means is intuitive. So Ritambara sees you can acquire information of the world, but the information that you acquire from the world is through intuitive understanding of what the world is, and not so much through inference. So you're looking into the world and you understand the nature of the world. There is no thinking, there is merely understanding. Yeah, this is Ritambara. The impressions born from Ritambara prevent the accumulation of further latent impressions. So the transparency of consciousness, when consciousness reflects on everything the way it is in front of it, yeah, that consciousness is a stable form of samadhi, in which samadhi bears no further seeds. Bears no further seeds means in which the state of absorption within your own true nature doesn't divert yourself. The quality of that state doesn't cause any diversion from the state itself. Yeah? This is the end of the first chapter. So you see, here in the first chapter, he speaks about the path of samadhi and the path of deep meditative absorption. And then the purification of consciousness, that consciousness becomes like crystal and becomes transparent, and everything that lies in front of you shines through consciousness, and you just see what is, and you understand intuitively, and you understand without thought, and you rest in your own nature, and that is supreme freedom. This is the first chapter of the Yoga Sutras. You see, it's very beautiful. Are there things that come into your mind after reading Samadhipada? Now, is there anything like that comes to your mind, or? Good. The path to realization, sadhanapada. So that chapter is different than samadhipada. Sadhanapada is really about practice. Yeah. Of course, like, next week and the week after we may talk about yoga classes already. So maybe also in the course of yoga classes, when we speak about them, we can speak about, there is also a chapter about communication, like how you speak to other people. Yeah. I mean, to go back to your question, I think maybe it's still interesting to say a few more things about that. Of course, it's your responsibility to do that class that can be best understood by everyone. But simultaneously, there are these two simultaneous elements. It is your job to communicate or to transmit your best, that in the best possible way, so that the others have a great experience. But while doing so, you can't leave your highest possible vision of what the class should be that you are teaching. Yeah? And these are two contrary things, of course. Yeah? And both contrary things you must hold simultaneously in your being. Yeah? Both of them must simultaneously be remembered somehow. And in that way, things can come forward. Yeah. If we only do, if we orient ourselves after in the end, it also has to do a little bit of authenticity in that sense, because the world is the most profited somehow, also the world becomes better if each and every human being does what that being is able to do best. And this is why we should not try to copy other people, yeah? Not because the other people are bad, because the other people are fantastic in their own right, or at least you don't have the right actually to judge over the work of anybody outside of you. You do not know why the person is doing that, you do not know what the person wants. Yeah? You do not know how that hard that person tries. Yeah? It's not on you to judge over other people. But it is on you to be authentic as possible, because if everyone does what they are good in, the world turns into paradise. And if everybody tries to copy everyone else, the world is doomed and will fall into chaos, and nothing will be created. Yeah. So you have to stay with your authenticity and allow other people their authenticity. Let's say they don't want to follow, it's good. Yeah, don't follow. Doesn't mean that I will change, because I will not change. Somehow. Okay. So the path to realization, sadhanapada. The yoga of action. So very interesting. Patanjali starts here with a definition of Kriya yoga. Yeah? The yoga of action has three components: Tapas, Svadhyaya, Ishwara, Pranidhana. Its purpose are to disarm the cause of suffering and to achieve samadhi. Okay, this is very interesting. So the sadhana pada is the way of practice, or the way to practice. So the way in which your day-to-day practice, your day-to-day sadhana, forms the framework in which you can develop. What is that thing that hinders you in doing so? What is that thing inside of you that hinders you to have a day-to-day practice that makes you grow? Well, Patanjali says, well, it is the absence of Kriya Shakti, apparently. What does that mean? Well, it is the absence of the power of action, the absence to act. All things are created by action. Why is it that you can't go forward? Well, maybe you can't stand up early in the morning. Why is it that you can't lose weight, let's say? Why is it that you can't stop eating that thing? Well, you can't put what you already know into action. Why is it that you can't stop taking drugs? Because you can't put into action what you already know. Why is it that you can't stop looking at your smartphone all the time and wasting the power of awareness that is a God-given gift to you to create the world? Why is it that you can't stop doing that? Well, because you cannot put what you already know into action. So what is lacking here? The power of action. So what is lacking here is power. That's what's lacking. You lack power. You're too weak. This is the problem. You know? Now you could say, yeah, and it is apparently the problem. Yeah? And when people find strength inside of themselves, amazing things can be accomplished. Simply with strength. Not with talent or something, no. Not with wisdom, no. You don't need wisdom or talent or raffinesse or anything of this. This is not required. The only thing that you need is the power of action. So you need to do it. It is a little bit like, let's say, do you need to be very talented to play the piano very well? The answer is absolutely not. Yeah? You can be dumb like a block of wood. The only thing that is required is that you stand up in the morning and you practice every day for 2 hours. That's it. After 2 years, you play like Mozart. Okay? This is what's required. Yeah, you could say, are you trying this already since many years? Because you're shaking your head. It didn't work with me. Yeah? It is true. It's really true. And maybe it may not be true for you and the piano, but maybe it's true for another thing. What is required in order to achieve also the goal of somehow a greater realization, insight into the secrets of reality or a happy life profoundly is action. That is what is required. This is what Patanjali puts here in the beginning. The yoga of action has 3 components. Kriya yoga has 3 components. So what are the 3 components of Kriya yoga? Because that's interesting. So now you could say, well, I'm not able to have the power of action. I can't act according to my best knowledge. Because all problems that we all have, that everyone has, can be overcome. And interestingly, we know usually how we could overcome them. Like, let's do a little mind experiment for yourself. Now, just a little experiment for yourself. Think about a problem that you have. Like something that you really despise about your existence. You know, any outer or inner problem. Yeah? Now I tell you, you know how you could overcome it if you would just do it. Do you know? Yes. Can you do it? Well, this is what's required. Yeah? Simply. So the power of action is required. So how can we actually come closer to the power of action? Well, 3 components are necessary. The first component for the awakening of the power of action, so to empower you, the first thing is tapas. The word tapas in Sanskrit means heat. Yeah? So the first thing that is required is heat. What does it mean, heat? Heat takes shape in different forms. Heat takes the shape of passion sometimes. You know, sometimes when you're very passionate about something, you achieve it, but it's because of your passion. That passion, by the way, is indistinguishable from discipline. When somebody looks at you from the outside, yeah, he cannot say if you have passion for, let's take that example, learning every day 2 hours piano in the morning, or you have discipline. It is not distinguishable. As a matter of fact, that person stands up and plays like mad for 2 hours and then does something else. It's not clear if there is a difference. And there is no difference. This is what I'm trying to tell you. So tapas, that heat, is somehow what you are passionate about, but at the same time it is also your vigilance, your discipline. So interestingly, you could also put it like this: if you do not find your passion, your discipline in what you should do, then you could look at it from a different axis. Maybe you should do it in a way that you can find the discipline, or you search for the passion within you. So you search and say, where's the passion within me in doing it? You know, where is the discipline? Where is the heat? You know, tapas means heat. It also means effort. It means vigilance. You know, it means standing up and you, with effort, you're just doing it. You know, this is tapas. Of course, a very important part of yoga. And without effort, there is no yoga. Interestingly, when we look at the whole chapter of Sadhana Pada, the whole thing starts with tapas. You know, tapas is basically the first commandment. Yeah, if you look at it, you know, the first one is tapas somehow. And I also believe tapas is really the beginning of any practice that you can do. Yeah, the cultivation of fire. And this is maybe also why Arjuna is sent into the world, because he's also tapas, he's also fire, he's the element of fire. So that cultivation of fire is the ground. And what will this tapas do to you? That tapas will have a consequence. It will purify you. How it will purify you? It will destroy everything that's in the way of your passion. So if you are afraid of standing up in the morning, it will destroy your fear. If you're too tired to do that right thing, it will destroy your tiredness. If you're too unwilling, it will destroy your unwillingness. If you're too weak, too sick, too whatever, it will destroy precisely that. Like tapas will purify you. And of course, the way into purification is always painful. But as a yogi, as we already have said, pleasure and pain should not be your guide. So don't regard pleasure and pain as anything important. You should do that what is right and not what is pleasureful. You know, so many people have killed themselves because of pleasure. If people do the pleasureful, they take heroin. It's very pleasureful, by the way. So if you want to have something very pleasureful, maybe you take heroin. But it's not good for you.
Maybe you take what?
Heroin.
Oh, heroin.
Yeah? It's a drug.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
And it kills you.
Yeah.
But it's pleasure. So the pleasure is not that, the pleasure is no guide of what you should do. It's no guide of truth. You know? For example, I'm so happy that I stopped eating sugar in my life. I'm so happy. And I didn't know how bad it was for me, but when I stopped eating it, I realized. You know, I had caries when I was younger, all kinds of things. I lost 2 teeth because I didn't floss in between also, behind up there. It's only because of sugar. You know, since I stopped eating sugar, I almost have the feeling I don't need to brush my teeth anymore, which I still do, don't worry. Because they don't get a kind of, they're just not, yeah, it's amazing. Not only this, like you have much more control over your cravings, your mood is much better, you're much stronger, it's just much better in any way, in every way. Yeah? But sugar is very pleasureful. You know, this is very sad. You know, Sachertorte, chocolate brownie, yes, I do understand. It's great pleasure. But apparently that pleasure is no guide. Apparently it's not a guide to tell you what things are. It's actually meaningless. Yeah, it doesn't explain you. You know, you should, according to your best insight, yeah, and your power of observation, choose what is to do right. Yeah. Okay. By the way, this is not yogic food not to eat sugar. Yeah, the yogis are very fond of sugar in India. Yeah, this is really like yogic kitchen, nourishing oneself is a very interesting thing actually. Yeah, how they do. Yeah, of course the kitchen is supposed to be vegetarian, but this is because of ahimsa. This is mainly because of the commandment of you do not want to harm another living being. But that vegetarian command is then also substituted with and it depends on the school, on the lineage, yeah. But certain yogis, they only eat like kind of dry fruits, honey, dried ginger, milk, ghee, and foremost, what one of my teachers suggested, milk with a lot of sugar. Like, you know, like you take basically the liter of milk, you pour in like, I don't know, 300 grams of sugar, okay, that the thing flows over, then you cook the whole thing up and then you drink this, okay. That's the way they feed themselves. But apparently, you know, apparently if you do only that, but nothing else, it's also okay again, yeah. But you should do anything else, yeah. I don't know, yeah. So tapas, so here we got off track. So tapas is the discipline, and it's the first step for the awakening of the power of action. So the first thing we need is tapas, the first thing we need is discipline. But discipline alone, or heat or passion, yeah, is not the only thing that is required. There is something else also required for awakening of the power of action. What is that? It is the cultivation of awareness. Svadhyaya means orientation towards the self. This is what it means. Svadhyaya is very complex in its semantic realm, so in its meaning. It means also self-inquiry. Yeah? You could translate it with awareness cultivation, but it's not only that. It is like, it's also studying, it's learning, but it's foremost studying of yourself. It is like you could, to translate this word correctly, it's like maintaining an open mind that is always ready to inquire about yourself and about the world. So looking on what things mean. For example, if you feel something, if you feel pain in your back, you know, ask yourself, what does that mean? If you have a thought, observe that thought diligently and look at that thought and deconstruct that thought. Where does it come from? What does it try to tell me? Why does it appear to me? You know, when you, for example, wake up in the morning and one day you don't feel your tapas, reflect on that. Don't go away. Reflect on it. What does that mean? Why don't I feel that? You know, observe clearly, fully. You know, why is that here? Why is this happening to me? You know? Okay, Svadhyaya is, but it's also the cultivation of awareness. So on a certain level, it is pay attention to what's actually happening. Self-evidently, if you have just blind passion, so blind discipline, you cannot be successful. Because you do not know where you're going. You do not know how you are going. You do not know why you are going somewhere. For that reason, awareness is required. Self-inquiry is required. And Patanjali says later, self-inquiry or the cultivation of awareness also helps you to reach communion, union with your own personal deity. So it helps you to reach communion with your divine inner self. Why is that the case? Well, because actually your thoughts, you know, you should be intimate with yourself sometimes. What does it mean to be intimate with yourself? You know, for example, when you go into the forest and you walk and you're just thinking, then the mind flows into the dream state. Are you intimate with yourself? Hard to say. You're actually dreaming. When you're outside and you're working and you're doing some carpentry or some painting or some cooking, are you intimate with yourself? Hard to say, because your mind is outside in the object that you're doing. You're also not with yourself. To be intimate with yourself is to pay attention to yourself. But really, it means like to walk and to pay attention to your own thoughts. And suddenly you feel a sadness, then you inquire, why do I feel that? How does it really feel? What is it truly? Where does it come from? Yeah? And you may hear a bird and you may like the sound of the bird and you may think, what does the sound mean to me? Why do I like it? What is it? You know? And you may walk and you may feel in your lungs the air and everything, and you may think to yourself, you know, how does it feel like? How does it make me feel like that I'm feeling that? Paying attention to yourself, paying attention to the world, to what's actually happening. Talking to you, talk to yourself. Because the point is that you are not alone within yourself. You are not, you know, what you must understand is, what are you as a human being? Yeah? We had this thing before, as I said, there is consciousness, Purusha. Yeah? And consciousness, Purusha, moves through different pearls of your experiences. It moves through your different thoughts, your different feelings, your different times, your different stages of existence, and it creates one coherent whole. Okay? This is your Purusha. But these different pearls and these different things, interestingly, many of them are literally different entities that live within you. So you are like a collection of different beings. You are, you know.
To talk from a small boy.
Not only you are a small boy, but you are. You can.
Okay.
You can, of course. But what I mean is like, there are many you need sometimes, for example, when you feel angry or when you feel afraid, when you feel pushed, it is because two parts of you haven't properly talked to each other. It's like you have that physical part of you that wants to sleep, and then you have that pranic part of you that has desire and wants to experience something, and you have the mental part of you that wants to explore some dream, and you have the spiritual part of you that actually wants to let go of all this shit and do something else. Yeah? And you have all these different parts of you, and they're all not properly talking, and everyone is hitting each other, yeah, to get their will through. Yeah? And this is not good, and this creates disease. You should, as Purusha, as consciousness, unify yourself within yourself so that all the different parts of you can align. Somehow the alignment of the different parts of you is also the alignment of the chakras. It is the alignment of the physical, the pranic, the mental and the spiritual. Align these inside of you. You're a collection of different beings. Yeah? You're not aware of this. And literally and interestingly, these different beings that you are, they have different needs. They all have different missions. Somehow your purpose as a human being is to unify the missions of all the creatures within you so that each one can achieve its goal. I think it's very beautiful to perceive yourself as a shepherd. And what are the sheep? The sheep are not other people. The sheep are their own parts of within you, where each and every one of them wants a mission to fulfill. And your purpose is to properly align them so that each and every one can achieve its mission. What is that? Very basic. I tell you some basic elements because I go to the koshas. Your first mission is to keep yourself warm, to feed yourself and to procreate and to create a family. This is the mission of your physical body. You should fulfill it, but it's not the only mission that you have. You must respect the body and its needs. You must protect it. Interestingly, the body himself consists out of different beings. Each and every organ has its own thoughts. Each and every organ has its own will, has its own need. And by the way, physically, literally, they compete with each other in the body for nutrients, with each other. So literally, they are different beings. You could say the liver is its own thing and the heart is its own thing and they're all talking to each other, you know. And of course, there are in that unity that you call a body, but that unity is just a mental idea that unity doesn't exist. You know, if you strip away that outer border of your skin, in a way you're also in contact with the air around you, and you're in contact with the plants you eat and with the water you drink. Your bodily barrier doesn't end with your skin. Yeah? So you are that many different beings, even physically, that talk to each other in your body. And your job is to make them all work well. But then also you have a pranic self, a vibrant self, that exists out of desires, and that exists out of dreams, that wants pleasure and wants experience, and that wants to grow, that constantly wants to grow, that is very eager in constantly procreating in creativity, vision, art and feeling. This is pranayama kosha. This is the body of prana inside of you, that has different constituents, that has Vienna prana, apana prana, samana prana, udana prana. Yeah? Which you could say they're different beings. Vienna prana has its own consciousness. Maha prana has its own consciousness. They all move through you. They're part of you. You govern them. Okay? And sometimes when they're unhappy with you, they make you suffer. You know, because you're not doing what they need. Yeah? Then they get sick. And eventually, if you're very bad, they kill you. Yeah? Then you get sick. It's not working. And then you have the mental body. Yeah, that you all know too well, yeah, which is made out of thoughts and concepts, and that is made out of power. This is what the mental body is made out of, you know. It's made out of the will to explore the universe, to process the universe. This is what the mind wants. You know, the pranic body somehow wants to taste the flavors of the universe and grow, yeah. And the mental body wants to possess the mystery of the universe. It is the magician. It wants to expand infinite and explore the secrets. And you are his master, and you have to protect the mind so that the mind can fulfill the mission. Because in a way, you know, your own mind doesn't belong to you. Why doesn't it belong to you? Because we all share a collective mind. Every thought that I create is also for you. When somebody invents the wheel on one part of the earth, another one invents the wheel at the other part of the earth. Okay? The mind doesn't belong individually to the people, just like the mental body doesn't. So how is it then that you have a mental body actually, individually? Well, the reason is you are taking care of that particular fraction of the cosmic mind. Your mission is to make sure that that particular part of the cosmic mind can properly grow and contribute to the whole. This is your mission. And if you do that wrong, because you don't purify the mind, because you don't focus the mind, because you don't expand the mind, well, then that mind will make you suffer. Yeah? It will produce all kinds of horrible thoughts and make you feel miserable. Yeah? So this is interesting here for you to understand. So, and this is why you should actually pay attention to yourself. This is why you should cultivate awareness. You should cultivate awareness so that you can find harmony within yourself. And that the different parts of yourself can find whole, can find home. That you can be one with yourself. You know, like self-observation is self-inquiry. It's talking to yourself. Talking to your worries, talking to your fears, talking to you. You know, forgiving you, understanding you. Looking at your passions, your thoughts, thinking, where do they come from? What do they mean? Yeah? Why do I do that? Actually, truly, why do I do that? And then become more integrated as one integrated self. So, Svadhyaya, the self-observation, observe yourself. And then we have Ishwara Pranidhana. Ishwara Pranidhana is the highest one, it's the orientation towards God. So the power of action that should enable you now to do what is right, what you already know what is right, is awakened through discipline, awareness cultivation, giving yourself to God. Because, why giving yourself to God? Because you individually, you are nothing. And I might say, what? This is so upsetting. How can you say that? No, you're also really nothing, you know, and you do not know the way. So you individually, you cannot know the way. You know nothing. I know nothing. You know, and you know nothing. Everything that we know by the grace of God. We know by the grace of Guru in a way. We know by the grace of that thing that is compassionate with us to give us insight. You know, and when we have insight, this is a gift. This is not something that we have achieved. It's something that we can be so grateful about. We can be so grateful that we know that we can see a way. You know, we can be so grateful that we are allowed to live every day. We can be so grateful if we are allowed to be brave. We can be so grateful if we are allowed to be disciplined. We can be so grateful if we are allowed to be strong. We can be so grateful that we can wake up every day in the morning and be allowed to breathe another day. How beautiful is this? This is the grace of the Supreme, that you are allowed to exist. Yeah? And you should be so thankful that this is here. Wow, you should be so thankful. This is Ishwara Pranidhana. Give yourself to God. And also, this is very forgiving for you. Because in a way, I told you, yoga is the art of radical self-responsibility. Well, in a deeper sense, you know, why can the yogi take full self-responsibility? He can take full self-responsibility because profoundly he knows that he is not responsible for anything ever. Because the yogi is the one who gives everything to God. You know, I can take my self-responsibility for my whatever I want to have, yeah? Simply because, anyways, I have no idea how to achieve it. Everything that I can do is I can give it to the Supreme. And I can be grateful if I'm allowed to receive. Yeah, and this can give you hope. Because in a way, you know, in a way, I think as a human, in a way you realize no matter how good you are in whatever you are good in, somehow, even the better you become, the more you see how less you can. So it is like that the better you are in the music, the more you see how bad you are. You know, the better you are in any art of the mind or of the body, the more you see how incomplete that art is that you create. And so from all accesses, you're always incomplete. You're incomplete from the axis that you're effectively incomplete. And the more you complete you become, the more you see you're incomplete. So you're always incomplete. But how is that forgiven? This is forgiven because when you surrender to the Supreme, you realize that it is nevertheless good and you're forgiven. So giving yourself to God somehow means to give yourself to the voice of forgiveness. Giving yourself to that you are forgiven for being such a stupid human being. Yeah? And that's okay. It's okay to be a stupid human being. The problem is if you do not have God, if you do not have Ishwara, then you will be alone. Alone in company. With whom? With your own stupid human being. And this is not good. Okay? And then you will become old and the only one that will be with you is your own stupid human being. And then you are in big trouble. Okay? That's why I think Ishwara Pranidhana is extremely important. Yeah? Do we have questions to this? Then I stop for now, before we continue. For today.